Hi, Joseph Gray. We met on a bus at the World Snowshoe Championships. It was in Italy 2 years ago in a place called Fondo. You've got quite a background in trail running, including this year's World Championships in Argentina. So let's start with that. So you won it a couple of times. How did this year compare to the last time?
The last time was different. I mean, the course, you know how it is. Mountains are different around the world, but the last time the course was quite a bit different, a little bit longer, and it was more uphill only. And so what was special about it was, I guess this year being that I usually consider myself to be more of an uphill runner, or at least that's my strong suit. But here was up and down, and so I kind of wanted to be, one of the few athletes who have been able to win an uphill year and also an up and down year. So, I mean, I would say that was probably the biggest difference between those 2 years. And this year, obviously, the weather played a big deal. It was really wet and a lot of water, a lot of mud, which, suited me pretty well. So, yeah, I would say the course this year was maybe it's not my strong suit in terms of the course style, but with the rain and the mud, it definitely made the race, more in my favor.
Okay, for those who don't know Argentina very well, which part of Argentina was it?
It was in Villa La Angostura. I'm trying to think of the name of the mountain. Really far south. It's in you fly into Bariloche, and then you go a couple hours to Villa La Angostura. Beautiful place.
Beautiful, yeah. I've been to Bariloche. It's a lovely, lovely place.
Yeah.
And surprisingly beautiful. Not covered in snow.
Yeah. This year the peak had a little bit of snow, but because the classic mountain running championship that was the day before the race that I did, we had a lot of rain, and so it kind of washed it out. So there was more mud up at the top. There's a few patches of snow you stepped on, but it wasn't like snow running or anything per se.
Okay. Now, so Joe, a lot of people be interested background. So if you could just tell us a little bit about your background. You were brought up on a U.S. Army base in Germany.
I spent just a few years there. My dad got stationed there during the Desert Storm period, and we were there for a little over 3 years. So yeah, it was a pretty cool place to do elementary school and get another taste of another culture. And coming from America, we saw a lot of things. We were exposed to a lot of things that we hadn't seen at that time. My brother's a little bit older than me, but it was a great experience, man. I loved living in Germany.
So how old were you when you left? You're a wee lad.
Yeah, I was in elementary school still, so it was like maybe second or third grade we came back.
So I read somewhere you used to run around the woods with your brother quite a lot when you were younger, and that's where you sort of discovered your athletic prowess.
We used to play like kind of this game called Manhunt. It's basically like tag, except with teams. And, you get some time to hide, but it involved a lot of running, and, we were usually in the woods. And so running across a lot of, branches and rocks, roots, all kind of crazy stuff. So, yeah, I was exposed to it at a very early age, and actually running in the outdoors and trails and stuff like that. It wasn't a sport to me per se. We were just doing it for fun. It was something that I was definitely exposed to quite young.
And you played quite a lot of basketball in your youth.
Yeah, that was the main sport. My father was a basketball player, and so it became pretty natural to play basketball.
Okay, and fast forward, being a house with your family, presumably, you moved to Washington. And how did you manage to get into trail running after that? Or was it when you moved to Colorado that you really got into it?
Trail running came after college, so we consider cross country to be, trail running, especially, in the UK, you guys got real cross country there. But yeah, it's almost like trail running. So I did that, and then track and field in college. And then after college, after my eligibility was up, and, I wanted to try something new. A friend had told me about mountain running, and I came out to my first championship, gave it a go, and just loved it. And it was very reminiscent of cross-country running, but just way more difficult.
Yeah, so, I mean, cross-country in America, I'm guessing, is very different than cross-country over here. I don't know if you've seen pictures of the UK cross-country scene, but it tends to be knee-deep in mud and very hilly.
Yeah, no, you guys got more of the real cross country, the real roots of cross country up there. And I want to get out there to do some of those races. I don't know if foreigners are allowed to just jump in some of you guys' races, but if they can, man, I would love to jump into some of those.
Oh yeah, I think so. I mean, I do remember when I was a kid growing up, there was a chap called Steve. I think his name was Steve Tunstall, who won the national cross country. I think he won it a couple of times, and I know he'd just come back from being in the French Foreign Legion at that time. That's going back a few years to run, and won it a few times. Have you ever run in the UK?
Yeah, I ran in the Bupa, the cross country race up in Scotland. Spent some time out there in Cambridgeshire and March area. Really good friend of mine from college is from out that way, and did a little bit of running out there. I've raced in Wales.
Have you done any?
Yeah, I mean, I need to get up there more, though.
Done any trail running over here?
I don't think. Well, no, the mountain running championship was in Wales one year, so I mean that was the only time that I've been out that way.
That was a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Have you been to any of the national parks yet?
Good question.
Snowdonia, Lake District, up in the Cairngorms?
I've been to Lake District. I've never been to Snowdonia, I don't believe. Because where we were in Wales it's like 30 minutes from Snowdonia. It's like another kind of mountain range or something.
Yeah, so you would have been Betsy Coed, I think. It was held up that way, wasn't it? A few years ago, yeah.
We couldn't pronounce any of the words out there, man. That was
Yeah, well, I am semi-Welsh, so and I'm still learning to pronounce words correctly in Welsh, so yeah, no excuses. If you were to do a race over here that was on the trails, what would it be? Have you got any in particular that you would like to do?
I haven't given it much thought. I'd probably be contacting someone like you and asking you, what you thought would be the good one to go to. Otherwise, I mean, just in terms of racing, there's definitely a couple of different cross-country races that I've seen, out that way that I would love to run. But, yeah, in terms of trail racing, I don't know of a ton, the big races out there.
Well, there's some classic sort of really long stuff. You're quite versatile, so it's sort of hard to put you in a box on what your favourite distances are. Then I might be able to advise you.
Well, I don't know. I've found that it really depends on what I'm focused on at the time. So if I'm focused on something short, then that's my favorite distance. But if I have something in mind that I'm excited about and it's long, then that'll be my favorite distance.
Okay, so what's the upper end of what you would run? I mean, what's the longest distance you've run in a race?
I've done just 50K is probably the longest. I'd probably go up to 50 mile, at least while I'm running professionally. I think, when I'm done competing professionally, I'd probably do some longer stuff. Yeah.
Meanwhile, looking through your sort of running CV, you've got a sort of 63-minute half marathon, a 28-minute 10K, 28:18, is that it? 2-hour 18 marathon. And you're a pretty handy trail runner too. So I suppose you've got quite a diverse running CV. But I guess in America it's a different scene, isn't it? Tell me about the scene in America compared to in Europe.
I think the big difference is in the U.S., there's a lot more money, in the shorter distances, which I think that's kind of the case globally. But in the U.S. specifically, you're dealing with athletes who are very versatile. When you show up to the start line of a big mountain trail race, especially if it's, sub-ultra, you got a lot of guys with versatile backgrounds, so you don't know what you're going to get. You got some guys who are really fast, some guys who have really great accolades, cross country on the track. And so you kind of get a mixed field. And I've noticed, like, when I've raced in Europe, you don't see that as much. You see most guys, a lot of guys coming from a ski-mo background, or, they're trail runners all year. That's kind of what they do year round. And so I think just that the diversity is really tough in the U.S. It makes it very competitive.
Right.
And there's a lot of depth too. So, and I've found in the U.S., if you have a bad day, you can get buried. You can have just slightly off day.
Yeah. Well, it sounds a bit like the UTMB or, I don't know, in the cross-country scene, the English national cross-country. You have a bad day there, you end up in the hundreds.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so it's more sort of diverse in terms of people's backgrounds. I mean, what would you say from a commercial point of view? Do you think that there's more commercial backing in America for trail running? And why is that? That's true.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, with America being such a big country, there's a lot of big athletes here. There is a lot of wealth in our country, so I think a lot of athletes are able to chase their dreams a little bit longer than some other countries.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it does kind of control the market in terms of, there's more athletes running at a high level in the U.S. as compared to most other countries. And so they control the media a little bit more.
Okay.
And obviously sponsorships and things like that will follow the media and what's hot in the media.
So would you say that got a few sponsors like ProTech and Hoka and Casio watches? Do you choose your sponsors or do they come to you?
It goes both ways. Sometimes you're approached and sometimes you approach them. It just depends. There's sometimes a company comes at you with a great idea and you try it out, you love it, and then you want to go forward with them. And then there's other times where you've tried something that you really liked and you're like, maybe they haven't reached out to you, but you reach out to them because you love the product. You
are sponsored by a brand, for example, like Hoka. Does that mean you're excluded from wearing any other shoes, or can you have multiple brands? Like in the UK, you're probably expected to almost.
You mean for footwear?
Yeah, for example, yeah.
Oh no, yeah. When you sign, there are people. It depends on your contract. Like if you're signed to where they're paying you and you're an endorsed athlete, yeah, you're not going to wear any other shoes. You might be able to, for example, wear shoes that are kind of affiliated with that brand. Like if it's a conglomerate, like a publicly traded company, and the company has other brands, you might be able to wear those shoes casually, but you're not going to be wearing them in competition for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How many trail runners are there in America who are professional, full-time, able to live off it?
Man, I don't know. From what it sounds like, there's not that many. I couldn't give you a number, but from what I've heard, it's just not that many.
Because of the seasons you have out there, because you live in Colorado now, right? Presumably it gets pretty cold in the winter and quite snowy, right?
Not so much where I'm at. It definitely, you got half of that, right? It can get cold, because we're on the Front Range, and you could get a day where it's like -10, Fahrenheit, and that doesn't feel good at all. But usually short-lived, and the sun is usually out, so it's not horrible.
Okay, so I was just wondering, so if that means that your climate means that you have to diversify a bit and maybe try a little snowshoeing or try a little, something else. Like Kilian Jornet is definitely into the.
I think it helps. If the thing is, there's not a lot of athletes who can be versatile and compete at a high level in multiple events and multiple genres, and so therefore maybe it hurts their ability to make money year round. But if you can, and it does help you be considered a professional athlete where you don't maybe need another job because you can make money in different genres.
Yeah, okay. So, but I mean, I was chatting to you in Italy, and it was interesting what you were saying about you were talking about how a lot of technical clothes that we wear now. I think you were saying you had a conversation with your grandmother. I remember, and I think it was your grandmother pointed out to you that the clothes you were wearing were like sort of extraterrestrial, quite strange to that generation, and that we actually are sort of guinea pigs for this new sort of these new technical clothing, which I thought was quite interesting because I suppose it's true. I know when I was younger, everything was made fairly simply. Well, there were synthetic products on the market, but certainly wasn't sort of like extra fast wicking, luminous clothes and things that would keep you dry and all. Yeah. So you were talking about that. I thought it was quite interesting because it's not something people talk about very often in the trail running world. As into question.
Yeah, I think it is. It's something I think about now. You get older, you start thinking about life and health and things like that. You wonder about the things that you expose yourself to, and we wear a lot of synthetic things these days, and synthetics and everything, socks, pants, shirts, whatever.
Yeah.
And it starts to make you wonder, well, man, is the increased rate of cancer and all these diseases, is that somehow linked to the fact that we are creating so many synthetic things out there, and even synthetic vitamins, synthetic foods? I mean, it's crazy how many things we are using as a human race today, and it makes you wonder, like, are we going the wrong way?
It's interesting, Joe, because I was going to ask you next about your diet and if you're vegan, or a lot of trail runners, professional trail runners now seem to be vegan or at least have sort of very strict diets. Do you comply with that? Do you fit into that?
No. I mean, it's a great, I know some people, got a lot of friends who are vegan or vegetarian, and some of them do it because that's what they like. Some of them do it because they feel like what we're doing to animals is bad. And I 100% agree with them. But I think, for me personally, as a professional athlete, animal byproduct is kind of a performance enhancer. So you kind of makes life a little easier, but also it assimilates in the human body a little bit better, a little faster, more efficiently. And so for me, I eat meat and I eat whatever I want. I kind of,
Okay.
a lot of different things, and I feel like I don't want to add stress in my life. So
Yeah.
I don't want to be one of those people like, I can't have this ice cream, because I'm going to gain a pound. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like that's just not a good way to live. Our life isn't long enough to be stressing about such trivial things.
Yeah, okay. I see exactly what you're saying. Okay, so moving on from diet then. The other thing I sort of interested in what you were talking about, you're saying just sort of going for a run in certain parts of the States requires you to have almost survival skills. Because unlike in the very tame United Kingdom, yes, we might need to understand mountain skills and understand, the weather and the navigation, for example, in one of the national parks. But we are unlikely to be chased by a wild bear, and we're certainly unlikely to see a mountain lion, for example. But in certain parts of the States, you're quite likely to. Has this happened to you?
Yeah, I've seen a couple. I've seen a lot of wildlife. I mean, I would say, bears are obviously for me the scariest. I think a mountain lion, if it's an adult, yeah, that's pretty scary. But typically, when you see mountain lions, they're really skittish. They don't bother you. They're just kind of looking, or they're curious. But a bear, they're just so fast. They can climb trees really well, and they're very aggressive, especially brown bears. But we don't really have those in Colorado, thankfully, or at least near where I live. We have the black bears, and they're usually just, if you're camping or something, and you leave your food out, they're just going to eat all your food. Probably not going to bother you too much, but definitely scares you if you come across one.
Yeah, I think you were talking about sort of nearer Canada when you go out that way.
Yeah,
beyond New England.
Canada's scary, especially like near, like Canmore in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the most beautiful trails you'll see, but you definitely should run with like a bear spray can, because you will see a bear more than likely. If you're a trail runner, you're going to be out there for a few hours, you'll see some.
Okay, it certainly makes your morning run a little bit more lively.
The stomach up, gets the nerves rolling.
Yeah, indeed. So listen, I was going to ask you about some of the projects that you were involved with, Joe. I was doing a bit of research into your other life, if you like. You're quite keen to create awareness about sort of lack of diversity or lack of role models from maybe ethnic backgrounds or people with non-Caucasian backgrounds, for example. And I know trail running is quite homogenous in the UK. Once you look at it, you might not think about it, but once you look at it, you realise that actually it is. You obviously have the same impression.
Yeah. It's a very homogenous sport here in the States as well, which that to me is not the problem in itself. The problem, I think, really stems with the media.
Okay.
Most of the articles in the media is more focused on white athletes, and it has been for years.
Yeah.
There's not been a lot of articles that attract the eye of minorities or Black Americans, as I speak of with my project. And, there's nobody that looks like us in much of the advertisements. And when they do look like us, they use models, which is such a cheap, I don't even know how to put it. It's disappointing, right? Like, you can't inspire somebody with a model. The kids these days who have athletic aspirations, they know the difference between a model and a real athlete.
Yeah.
And so, when you're using models, it's like you're not really helping the situation at all.
Yeah.
And, I tell people all the time, like, look at the sport of basketball. It's pretty diverse. But you see that Black people, especially Black Americans, dominated. And that's because early on, they had advertisements for Black athletes. Larry Bird was advertised. A lot of white athletes were advertised back in the day, but they also advertised Black athletes. And so the sport grew to where America produced the best Black and white basketball players, period, in the world.
Yeah.
And, but the problem with trail running, it's such a new thing.
Yeah.
It's so different for the Black community because, the grand majority of Black people don't live near mountains and trails. And so, in that sense, it's not accessible. But that shouldn't be a limiting factor because, I've been to places in really urban places in, Baltimore, where there's not a basketball court anywhere, and kids made basketball hoops out of milk cartons, and they ended up being really great basketball players later in life. And so just, the accessibility is one excuse, but it's not, in my opinion, it's not the factor that really matters. It's really, these athletes, these young kids don't have people to look up to because the media's not focusing on them. And then when the media doesn't focus on them, then sponsorships don't focus on minority or black athletes. So then it's just kind of a repetitive circle. Like, you never see any black athletes. They don't inspire the next generation. So you don't see any new athletes coming into the sport.
That's really interesting. So if I was to compare it to the UK scene, where I suppose trail running's still fairly in its infancy, although there's a huge booming sport though, but financially maybe not very rewarding, therefore not as aspirational as some other sports. Could that be a reason as well? It's not a means to make a living, in other words.
Yeah, I would imagine you're right to some degree. That's true, but you got to remember that there's a lot of people who just love to be athletes. Like, there's people who play football or basketball, and they're making peanuts, but because they love it. I'm not talking about the guys in the NBA or in the NFL. I'm talking about there's guys playing in international leagues elsewhere. Yeah. They're not making very much money, but love the sport. And so it's the same thing with trail running. There's athletes who can make pretty good money, but they don't know anything about it.
Yeah, but in terms of participation numbers as well, would you say that there's a big inequality there? So just in terms of, you turn up a race, I don't know what the average race attendance is for a trail race in your part of the woods, but say a race that's attended by 1,000 people, would you feel like you stand out because of your skin color, or are you not really conscious of that at all?
What I realize is if the topic comes up, in close proximity to a race, then it's something I might, think about. But yeah, it's something I've not thought about because I love running, I love competing and stuff. I'm not really thinking about anything beyond that. But, over the last few years, I've definitely looked back at a couple start lines and, right before we start, and I'm like, man, I'm the only one out here. It's interesting. Like, you wouldn't think that you'd be the only one. It's a very weird feeling, because especially in America, where we have so many races and just so many different backgrounds, so you wouldn't expect to be anywhere where you're the only one.
Absolutely, yeah. It's strange that we're even talking about this. Actually, it seems odd because, to be honest, if I hadn't heard you say it, I probably wouldn't have thought about it. But now that you've mentioned it, it becomes startlingly obvious. But so, what are you planning to do about it? Are you planning to try to create an awareness with other black sportsmen or trail runners, or are you just starting the ball moving to see if you can maybe help people enter a sport that you love and share your passion?
It's kind of all of the above, but also just challenging the media to be more mindful that we are a rainbow of people in this world, and we have to focus on other races and other cultures and attract people from different backgrounds and even sponsorships, right? I'm trying to challenge companies to stop with just being homogenous and only sponsoring white athletes. It's okay to have some color in your sponsorship and in your sponsored athletes, and I think it only helps you because then black people, Asian people, Mexican, anybody will buy your stuff because you look more colorful. You have people that look like them.
Yeah, I mean it's odd to be having this conversation because one of my sporting heroes is a guy called Kipchoge Kino, who used to win Olympic medals back in the 1970s.
Definitely know that name.
Yeah, Kip Kino. So he's a bit of a legend in the running world, but also in Kenya, he's the godfather of Kenyan distance running. I stayed with him when I was 18 years old, and he showed us videos of his Olympic triumphs, and he used to talk very interestingly about the sort of media attention that was focused on Jim Ryan at the time when, I don't know if you remember, you're probably too young, he came from nowhere in media circles to win the Mexico 1500 meters by the largest ever margin. And at that time, the media wasn't really focusing on him at all. They were shocked that he even won the race because all the focus was on Jim Ryan. And I know you do get a sort of slightly narrow focus in media circles towards certain athletes or certain runners. But I think in this day of social media, it's harder to be like that because everybody knows everybody to a certain degree. But from a partition...
But not really, though. Not really. I mean, I won't say, I don't have to say names specifically, but you look at the media and you look at how they will treat certain athletes of color and how they'll treat certain white athletes. And even with these new doping allegations and things like that, with coaches doing, playing in the gray area, it seems like the black athletes are taking the short end of the stick, and the white athlete in the question is not. And this happens all the time. You look at, the recent U.S. championships, how, there's been a couple athletes who are, understandably, they are African-born, but they don't get as much coverage when they're winning. But then, the white athletes, when they win, you look at the recent trials and you look at, how they covered that. And it's like, when a white athlete wins, because everyone in the media, controlling the media, if they are also white, they're going to, cover their athletes more so than they're going to cover the black athletes. And not always, that doesn't always happen. But in this day and age, in my mind, it's probably happening for more reasons than one. So it's hard to say. I think people still do it. It doesn't have to, it doesn't look racist if I give coverage to one athlete over another. People don't question it, right? Because then they're going to be questioned. They're like, well, you're being racist because you questioned that. And it's like, well, if it's true, it's true.
Yeah, it's one of those subconscious, unspoken things which maybe people aren't aware necessarily until they're challenged on it. In UK sport, I don't want to talk too much about other sports because we're supposed to stick roughly to script, talking about trail running. But I mean, obviously, football in the UK, I think it's true to say you're as likely to see a black football player as heralded as a white football player because there are so many black football players playing in the Premiership, for example. But
I don't know. I can't speak on soccer football as much. Know it as well.
But I'm just contrasting that with other sports now that I'm thinking about it and comparing it to, say, rugby, where there's not a lot of black players in the top flight, and say, I think there is in athletics, but trail running is almost a new genre. I don't think people's awareness about it has been raised particularly. Maybe you'll be the person to do that. When you say you're challenging the media, but also just by achieving things, by winning the World Trail Championships, by running a half marathon in 63 minutes, by winning the World Snowshoe Championships. Yeah, admittedly a fairly minority sport at the moment. That kind of versatility should be able to transcend the sport. You look at someone like Kilian Jornet, what he's achieved, he's transcended the sport. So it takes someone with that amount of talent to do that, is what I'm trying to say, to have that kind of appeal. In terms of the project that you're involved with, the Project Inspired Diversity, is this your project, Joe? Or has someone asked you to be...
Yeah, it's something that I did. It's something that I came up with just to... I looked at my career when I was young and just how helpful it was to receive, any free gear for my sport. Just, I didn't have a lot of money, and so it was nice to get something free, and it kind of gave me motivation, inspired me to keep on going with the sport. I wasn't getting a ton of support early on in my career, and, anytime I got something free, it was just like a huge blessing. I wanted to be able to do that for other athletes, young athletes. And so that's what it's all about, man, is I reach out to the community and to coaches, and I surprise an athlete with some stuff from my sponsors. And, I'm very thankful that my sponsors have gotten behind. Yeah, no problem.
So I suppose a lot of people would like to know, Joe, because you're quite a relaxed character. I've met you only once, but you seem quite relaxed, and obviously you take your sport seriously and you love it, but you realise it's just a part of your life. But I guess you have to train pretty hard to get where you are. So could you tell people how you train? Do you have a regime, and what is it?
Taken kind of the approach of consistency. You don't have to have a whole bunch of magic workouts. You simply need to be healthy and be motivated to do the work. And as I've gotten older, I've realized I think we put so much emphasis on specific workouts and, oh, you have to do this amount of mileage. I think the real key is, are you hungry? Are you thirsty? Do you really want this? Are you motivated? And if you are, it doesn't really matter the volume you're doing. I mean, obviously you need to be doing enough volume for you to be able to be successful, and you have to figure that out. It takes years to figure that out for you, and then it changes as you age and as you get injured and things like that happen in your career. But yeah, for me, I think just staying motivated, making sure that I am getting in my long runs, my work, and doing workouts that are on specific to the terrain that I'm chasing a goal on. That's kind of been my keys for success.
Okay, so I mean, do you have a coach, for example?
So partially, yeah. Whenever I go to doing some road stuff or cross country, I'll go to Coach Simmons and I'll run a lot of my stuff, the workouts and things like that with the American Distance Project group. Mm-hmm. And during mountain trail season, I usually coach myself.
And when you train, do you train with a group some of the time, or?
Not for my workouts, but every now and then I meet up with people for some easy runs and stuff like that. Or a lot of it is kind of solo.
Trail is still, I suppose, a bit like, I don't know, I'd almost compare it to surfing in when it first emerged as a sport. A lot of it's actually experiential. It doesn't matter how good you are. Almost anyone who does it because they love the outdoors and they love the connection with nature. And I'm guessing you're no different there, Joe. You just happen to be very good at it. So is there a sort of point where you feel almost there's a sacrifice to be made in terms of your enjoyment of a sport when you get really good at it?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I think once you don't have, obviously, if you want to make money from it, then it can change things a little bit, because the professional side of athletics is obviously, it's uglier than just the beauty that you experience on a day-to-day basis in your training and being out in the mountains, because obviously money matters in terms of paying the bills and supporting your family and things like that. And so that professional side is different, but I still think for me, more than enjoying the financial side or the beauty of the trails, I think for me the thing that helped, and that's always kind of been there, is the love for competing, going up against people and challenging myself from a competitive side. I think if that's there for you, then you're going to be happy with anything that kind of comes your way, because if you love competing, the money will be there, the beauty will be there forever. You know what I mean? As long as you can get out there and challenge yourself.
So, I mean, I've only been to Colorado once before, and what I saw of it was very beautiful, like acres and acres and acres of trails. Is there a Colorado national park, or is there several national parks? Yeah. There's national forests and national parks, wilderness areas, all kind of stuff, open spaces. Yeah, they're kind of sprinkled up. Are you free to run anywhere then, or is there a lot of private land that's parceled up and off limits? It depends on where you are. You don't run into that as much in Colorado, but like a state like California, there is a lot of private land. You'll see some trails sometimes, closer to the city, you'll notice this more so, to like more on the west side of California, but you'll see like some beautiful trails, and but it'll be like kind of fenced off, and because someone owns it, and unless you are part of that entity, you will not be allowed to run there. Yeah, so that's why I was sort of interested how it compares to Blighty, because over here, I don't know if you know, but we had a Countryside Rights of Way Act that came in 2003, so only quite recently, which expressly admitted permission to people to run in national parks, for example. Basically, the default is that you're allowed to run there if it says you can. So if it's part of the Countryside Rights of Way Act, and it's demarcated with a certain salmon colour on a map, for example, or it's, I don't know, part of the Southwest Coast Path or a national trail, it's fine. But there are still huge swathes of private land, which is owned by utility companies, say, or private landowners, say. I'm just kind of interested how that compares to the States. if you actually have a national bill or a national right to roam or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, national parks, I think one thing you'll notice in the States is there's not a lot of races in national parks. There's a lot of like the national forests you can race in, but the national parks, very difficult to get a permit in those types of places.
Okay.
So you don't see, competition there per se.
Oh, for a race, you mean? Yeah. So you could go for a run there, but you could
still run. You could still go run.
Okay, got it. Can I just go back to snowshoeing a sec, because we haven't really talked much about that. When you set your goals for the season, do you think I'm going to do X, Y, Z snowshoe races, and then I'm going to do X, Y, Z for the summer for the trail? How do you carve up your year, and how do you prioritize snowshoeing compared to trail running?
So a lot of my races, I will, a couple months out, depending on, sometimes some races will offer you to come to the race, and then you kind of prioritize those over other races, and kind of fill up your schedule with races that make the most sense for you and for what you're looking for competitively, and also what you're looking for financially. And sometimes, there are races where it's in a place where I haven't been, or it's a place that I really love, and those other two options or priorities don't matter as much, and I just want to get out there and see that place. Yeah, I would say trail running probably is prioritized with a shoe, simply because of there's more trail racing, and typically, especially right now, it's more financially lucrative, so it makes more sense. The last few years, it's not been much of an issue. Even we don't have that many cross country races here in the States, not professional level ones anyway. There's basically two, it's a club championship and our national championship.
Okay, Joe, just people will be more interested to hear it from you than from me. So just to describe the difference between snowshoeing, say, and running. When you first put on a pair of snowshoes, can you describe the difference in terms of, running action and the sensation of running with snowshoes compared to running, with a pair of running shoes on?
It takes some getting used to, as you've probably experienced, because that's where I met you, a snowshoe race. But,
oh yeah, no, I had the tourist, the horrible plastic, really heavy tourist ones on, and within about 2 minutes I had to stop and retie them and change the way I was wearing them, because I didn't realise you could hinge them or unhinge them at the back.
Oh no!
So like flip flops.
It's an interesting feeling, because a lot of times the first thing you notice is if you feel kind of wonky because your stance is a little bit wider, your gait is a little bit wider to compensate for the thickness of the snowshoe on the inside, so it doesn't clip you on your ankles.
Yeah, so it makes everyone look a bit bow-legged, right? When you see them in photographs.
Yeah, and then on top of that, it's heavier than, say, your racing shoes with nothing else attached to it. And you're wearing more clothes because it's the winter, it's cold. And, when you step into the snow, you're losing power. And so a very different race than your typical trail or road race or track event. And it takes some getting used to. I mean, especially when you look at athletes who are successful coming from, say, similar backgrounds to me, one thing that we do well is our power output. Our wattage is really, it helps us. It makes us successful, and wattage is very important. But when you go into snowshoeing, you lose that wattage, and some people can deal with that and some cannot. It's a very strange feeling. It's like the difference between seeing someone run a dry, hard cross-country race compared to, the real cross-country you see in the UK, where, you're in mud and a lot of the running, and you're running quite a bit slower, and your stabilizer muscles are getting activated, and you're slipping and sliding, and you're not able to get as much power from each stride. It makes it a very different race.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. I think a lot of British people would be familiar with that contrast. In terms of what you've got planned for the rest of the year?
Well, as you guys have heard, the coronavirus is kind of taken over the scene right now, and so
I was going to ask you about that.
Looks like about two of my races that I had planned are canceled or postponed. So I guess I gotta figure out where I'm racing now.
Yeah,
or figure out when we're gonna stop canceling races.
that must have had a fair impact on you and your local community as well. So in terms of your lifestyle, how's that impacting you at the moment?
Yeah, and rightfully so. I think people are very scared right now. The media is making it seem like, it's World War Z out here. And obviously, the news, they got to stay afloat. So they got to come up with stories. So I get it. But yeah, people are very afraid, especially, in our community. What you see is the grocery stores are like empty. I've never seen a grocery store like have empty aisles of just nothing. Yeah. That's not something you typically see in the U.S. Yeah. We are like the country of overconsumption, and to see something empty in our country is like kind of alarming. But yeah, I mean, it's changing everything. Like in terms of, I have 2 kids, and like now I have to think about like, well, do I really want my kids to be out in public places right now? It's not something I ever had to think about before. I usually take my kids out; they do stuff with me all the time. But now, with them being so young, it's like, well, probably don't want them to do that. You gotta. I was talking to my wife the other day, and I was saying how I don't feel comfortable, kissing my kids as much as I used to because. With me traveling and me being an athlete and being around, being in social situations, I'm like, I could potentially have the coronavirus for a few days and not know it, come home and expose my kids. And then it's like, so it's kind of scary in terms of that. Is not that I'm scared or living in fear, but I'm more mindful. Like, I don't want to pass it on to my kids. If I didn't have kids, that wouldn't be an issue. But even, I wouldn't want to pass it to my wife either because it's a pretty nasty virus. Yeah,
I've got kids too, so I know exactly what you're saying. I don't travel as much as you do, but I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah, makes you more conscious, certainly, of and mindful of your everyday actions. That's for sure.
Changes everything. Even like date night. With me and my wife, like we have to kind of change that up now because there's a lot of places that are closed or you got to be mindful of, you might come in contact with someone or you might be touching someone with it, or they might cough on something. There's a lot of people with bad habits and they don't cover their mouth and just coughing all over stuff, or they don't wash their hands when they leave the bathroom. You see that a lot. I'm sure you've seen that in airports. It changes everything. And restaurants, you kind of got to be more mindful when you're in restaurants now. So it's like, man, this is a very strange time for us.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen, there's a really good Facebook advert doing the rounds. It's called Italian Grandma. The Italian grandma's telling her kids, I told you need to wash your hands. I always told you this. What's new? I always told you you had to sneeze on your elbow. I always told you this. What's new? It's brilliant. It's like the old school. Yeah. Telling it how it is.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll see you at some point in the UK doing one of our races over here.
Yeah, I would love to, man. Like I said, you guys got the real cross up there, man. I think everybody who loves cross country wants to race in the UK. It's kind of like, in America anyway, most of us cross country lovers, we all want to race up there. That's kind of the dream spot. So I got to get up there one time, but it wasn't the course that I wanted to run. The one in Edinburgh, they changed it, so it wasn't the tough course that they used to run like in the early 2000s, where you kind of went up Arthur's Seat a little bit more and there was a little bit more mud and stuff like that. It was a little more rugged.
Yeah, we
ran the course that kind of approaches Arthur's Seat and goes up for about 10 seconds but doesn't really go up, so it's still, you can still run it. It's still fairly fast for a cross country race. A little bit of mud, but it wasn't like some of the stuff that I've seen you guys have, your inter-county championships and stuff like that. Those real muddy races.
Those are the races I grew up with, and they all used to be a bit like that. And then the World Cross Country Champs came along and they started doing them on golf courses, and then that became the norm, and it all became about qualifying for the World Championships and doing fast courses because that's what the Kenyans ran on, and I remember the change very clearly. So at the one end you had the traditional courses, which still attracted thousands of runners every year, club runners of very high quality, versus the sort of select invite only very high quality, maybe international level, some club level, completely different course, completely different type runners as well.
Yeah, I mean, but even the ones on the golf course, you can make a tough course on a golf course. The problem is sometimes the golf course, if they give you the permit or the allowance, they'll tell you where you can run, and they're not going to let you run on the nice stuff, the nice hills, and they're not going to let you run in their sand pits and all that stuff. But every now and then you get races that do allow that, and those courses are really tough.
Yeah, I'm just trying to imagine what Donald Trump would say, 1,000 runners running across his golf course.
Hey, if he was smart, man, he would host a race, man. He might get some people to actually like him in this country.
All right, listen, Joe, it's very nice to talk to you. Thank you for spending the time. I wish you the best of luck with your life and your family and the rest of the season as well. Certainly, if you do come over to the UK, we'll welcome you with open arms.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you for having me, man, and wishing you the same, man. Wishing you much success and luck and health with your little ones. And definitely hope I can make it out that way for some good racing.